Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. I've got a special guest in Ivan Bebek from Coppernico, and today we're going to talk about copper. I'm very bullish on copper, but what I have a really hard time with is finding a lot of good copper exploration stories. In fact, there's not a lot in the development stage as well, which I think is part of the very bullish argument for copper. And Ivan is a serial entrepreneur in mining. He's had a couple successful exits or more. I can't remember. But I'm really happy to have Ivan on today. Thanks for joining us, Ivan.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's been a few years since we've spoken, but good timing and love to get into it with you.
Okay, well, why don't we start with the copper? A lot of people talk about the demand drivers, electrification, electric vehicles, the need that is in the power grids of developed economies and then building new ones. And so there's tremendous demand going forward. But what I don't think is people really understand how tight the supply chain is and how troublesome it will be for a long time into the future. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great topic that, as a generalist, just as a person, in whether it's Canada, the US, or Europe, you see a lot of projects come online or countries develop and expand. And the last thing I think people think about with a lot of technologies and infrastructure is the metals that are needed to drive those forward and to build those. They do pay for it with inflationary costs when metal prices go up, much like oil and gas goes up. They do pay for it, but not enough people ask about it. And from my career, it's been an explorer looking for metal. It's a fascinating business, finding a mine. What impact will that mine have? How long will that mine take from discovery to production? And I think the one thing that's missed globally is a lot of people don't realize that the mines that were sticking out of the ground that you could walk up to and start drilling and bring online, or that were very rich in value, those easy ones, perceivably easier ones, have all been found and are being mined. They're pretty mature mine lives. I think the word is, or someone has used, is they're older mines, such as dinosaurs, in the sense that they're becoming very deep holes in the ground. So the cost of getting the metal up those pits is going higher and higher, especially with higher fuel costs as well. But finding mines is rare. It's 1 in 1,000 to find a mine that actually becomes an economic mineral discovery that could end up being a deposit. And we've been there before on gold as a group, the group I work with. But as far as copper goes, it's a bigger problem because it's a bigger hole in the ground than a lot of other mines, and it has more of a social impact in areas that these mines can be found. It also requires pretty heavy infrastructure factors too. So these factors make that challenge to go find the perfect mine even more difficult. And it's rare that you have a project on the side of a road with power lines and water, as we do, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's rare to see these things, and it's rare to see, rich values and good quality metal that could be mined. If you move the copper price up high enough to solve the problem of a lot of copper in the world that's of lower grade, you can't produce low grade copper faster. There's no technology that really improves the speed. And if you think about a ton of rock and you think about the average copper mine in the world is around 0.5, 0.5% of that ton of rock is carrying copper in it. Some of these mines are 0.2 to 0.3% of that ton of rock are carrying copper. And if you look at that ratio and imagine how much to crush that ton of rock to get the copper out, you're getting so little. It's a very slow, long process. Governments have been challenging on the back of geopolitical, directions that have been very volatile through COVID. I think things have been a lot more difficult at first and possibly going back to being a lot easier. Now we're seeing the US declared copper as a critical metal last year. Copper to me is more appealing than other battery metals, even though batteries are driving a huge demand because its use is far beyond the electric car. it's in development, it's in drinking water and pipes, it's in everyday use, and
Everything.
it's in everything electrical.
Yeah.
So
It
my
is the
view,
most critical of all the metals, I think.
in my view, it is. I think it's you don't drink without copper, and you don't have lights on, and we're not doing this interview without copper. It's that essential,
We're not
amongst other
driving
metals.
around in cars. We're not eating out of a fridge. We're not cooking in an oven.
No.
It's
So simple uses, really hard to find large scale mines that could supply the world's copper supply. And third factor is the time from discovery to production. In some of these areas that I've referenced that can be tough, it can take 20 to 30 years before you see a major copper mine come online due to social impacts and challenges and environmental sensitivities and so on. So my only point there is there's been a 30 or 25-year bull market. I entered the business late 1999. Copper was around 60 cents a pound, 59 cents a pound.
I
And
remember
today
it
it's,
well.
you remember well, we have history there of the market. But look at it today. It's 4.5, 420, 440 on spot, and it's been over five. And its projection is to keep perpetually performing in our lifetimes because of the reasons we've just mentioned. So I'm a huge bull. I've wanted a major copper success in my career. I'm a gold bug, a copper bull, and I absolutely love silver. I don't want to use a word to really describe how much I like it, in the sense, but silver tends to be the best performing equity. Copper tends to be the longest performing mining equity, and gold tends to be the most emotional, volatile performing equity. That's kind of how I categorize all three. But in our case, we're chasing something big that could potentially make the world scale in a top 20 mine. And we can talk about that in a minute. But I absolutely love copper as an investment. I think you could buy any copper stock today, and in 10 years from now, assuming producer, mid-size, or a major producer, they're probably magnitudes higher in price, as you would have seen from the last 2 decades if you bought it a decade or two ago, just because the price of copper just will keep going up and dollars will
Actually,
diminish their value.
I think there's a power move coming into copper, Ivan. You see things like 10, 12 years ago, I remember hearing a guy expert talk about, we needed an Escondida every year just to deal with the demand from the developing economies. Then electric vehicles came on the scene, and lately it's artificial intelligence. And
Mhm.
all of these things are piling up that need a massive amount of copper. And the pipeline is just really, really tight. You look at the discoveries that have happened over the last couple decades, just fell off a cliff. And therefore, there's not a lot of projects in the development stages. And really, we need every development stage project to work. And we need a lot more exploration success. And I think to drive all that, you need copper to be 2 or 3 times higher than it is today.
Well, that's a great segue into investing, right? So the case for copper is quite straightforward. You don't even have to know anything about mining. You can watch a futuristic movie with cars floating, flying in electric society, and that's just going to drain so much copper that we're not finding and we don't have. But let's go to the last major takeover bid that's occurred in our space here, and let's give a lot of credit here to the Lundin family, the late Lucas Lundin, and the rest of his sons that are running the company now, Felo Mining. This is a amazing story if you know the whole background, but the stock went from $3 to 30, I think it's 33, $35 per share.
You're
That's
speaking,
that's
folks, he's speaking of Felo,
yeah.
that was offered 4.5 billion by Lundin Mining and BHP for their Felo project in Argentina.
Yeah, Argentina-Chile border on the both. It's at a bit of altitude, and that's an advanced exploration, headed towards development project. But that is the last major financial win in our sector. We've seen a decimation to mining equities in the last 3 years since COVID. Even though metal prices have worked, we have not seen share prices cooperate yet. We think it's coming. But I like to point to that because that's the last major win. That's the most current one of substantive size like that. And that's just a bit of what's more to come. I think seeing BHP come down to the exploration aspect and make a takeover like that is a very strong indication to a lot of feedback I've gotten, not just from BHP, but other of the majors that we've been speaking with, of the true demand that they have for the copper. So from that perspective, I think it's a very, very good sign that you can make a lot of money off a major copper discovery if you're lucky enough to have one.
And it solidifies, we've been hearing a lot about every major mining company wants copper. But cutting those big checks has been a little slower. But now we see BHP, and I think that could be a domino effect, where you see more of those mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, so BHP, we've all heard Bristow at Barrick, the CEO of Barrick, talk extensively about getting into the copper business. Newmont merged with Newcrest. Newmont's one of our shareholders. So they're obviously interested in the copper side as well. I mean, copper is for a major mining
BHP
company.
also took a run at Anglo for
Yep,
their
they did.
copper
Yep, they
and
did.
failed.
Yeah, and they did. And but I think from that, the precious metal companies, everyone realizes the long-term cash flow is going to come from copper. Years back, I said it's the new oil. About 9 years ago, when we got into exploring Sombrero for a major copper mine, I was talking about it being the new oil. And there was a lot of comments that criticized me extensively. And there's obviously people like myself that don't want to switch from gas to electric cars yet. And I'm planning it here in the near future, when it makes sense to do that. But, in that sense, it truly is, because you don't put oil in these cars anymore. You put copper wiring in these cars, 186 pounds of copper,
Plus the
roughly in each
copper you
electric.
need to get the energy to the car.
Then you have
And
that.
the power grids are all ancient.
Yep. And then you pointed out earlier in this interview, you pointed out the comment about an unforeseen kind of event. And we see China boosting right now. And there's China. India has barely come online yet. And that's even more people than China, I believe. And you have to look at when the pace of the population, which has been growing, it's doubled since the 80s on the planet. When you look at the pace of population growth, the pace of population, or the amount of population that does not have wiring and pipes and all of these things, never mind electric vehicles, you start to look at things as a consumer of it and say, well, where is it going to come from? And as an explorer for it, this is a big reason why 9 years ago we set out to go chase a major copper asset like we're doing now.
Right.
The major miners are interesting because they have to replace supply and show growth to keep performing, right? And cash is not as good as having a very good production pipeline. So if your project's big enough and it shows a multi-generational discovery pipeline and tonnage that can be added over time, I think those are the kind of projects that are going to make that similar exits that we saw here at Felo, or the bid from BHP on it. I think those are the kind of projects that are going to really move the bigger needles. The mid-size and smaller copper deposits will do extremely well, but it's going to come down to grade and infrastructure. And if I could guide anybody with a copper exploration story, make sure the power lines are not too far, there's access to water, and there's a
Roads.
road.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you look at this photo in the background, if you go back all the way back into those mountain ranges way back there, away from infrastructure, it's going to be a substantial challenge for everyone to go and finance and to build, and the cost is going to be quite significant. If you look at Sombrero, and if I could zoom in closer, you'll see high tension power lines going right over the drill as we're turning a drill.
Wow. Well, that brings me to another topic I wanted to talk to you about. Over my career as a market commentator, I had done very well with picks of Peru projects, but then they kind of went the wrong way, and it got harder to do things in Peru. I've noticed that Peru has really turned the corner regarding their attitude towards mining. And I think it's not a coincidence that Javier Milei in Argentina is really, I think he's going to be the model of what a lot of the countries, Latin American countries, Latinos want to be like. There tends to be trends in these politics. And, right now, Javier Milei is getting a lot of attention But then I started paying a lot close attention to what's happening in Peru, and I've heard some really great things coming out of the ministry, and permits are getting issued. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about your feelings on Peru.
Yeah, sure. So I first set foot in Peru in 2015, about 9 years ago, and I've seen about six presidents. We've seen left, we've seen right, we've seen a lot of geopolitical instability at the political office, but have not seen a disruption in the mining for the country. We've seen some mines get paused, then come back online. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But what's happening right now, I guess last year we had a chance to sit down with the ministers at PDAC, and we explained the variance of difficulties between Peru and Canada to get a permit to drill, or Nevada, or other great jurisdictions. And we've asked them to close the gap on that. It's too extensive for an explorer to get to the permitting phase just to drill some holes and reclaim the ground and have a nominal impact to none. And it's left, as good as when we started. And they listened. We've seen about a 50% cut in the timeline for multiple permits. We've also seen that from the mining stage as well. There's been a massive shift. Dina Bolarte, who took power once Castillo was impeached, she has been, in her office administration, has been remarkably supportive and changing a lot of rules that are making it a lot better for us. We have a permit. We are drilling. We were on a long path to get through social access. We finally got there. But once it came into getting the final drill permits, it went very smoothly and efficiently. And it took us about 4 months of a process that could take 12, in the way that we went, not to get into the micro details of it. But we're seeing a theme of that working out well. What we've done as well in our company is we've had a chance to do a lot of agricultural programs called AgroDias, where we bring agriculture into the Andes. And this is government grants that we have the team, the experts, to get the sponsorship for. We contribute the time and some capital. The government puts in a large grant, and then the communities also contribute a grant. But when you look at the altitude in the Andes and you say, well, what's missing in my background? It's cows, it's red meat, it's fish. So we've put on fish farms, we put in some French cows, Australian lambs, and we've done about $500,000 of agricultural programs, and we're about to bring 4 million more in the community and neighboring communities should we have our exploration success and just keep going. And if we leave tomorrow, hypothetically, it's not there, they will benefit from this from decades to come. And the fact that the community is invested into it as well, it makes it more sustainable. We're the first junior to have done this in South America. I believe many others, major miners and juniors, are starting to do this. The gap between the miner that gets rich and the people that benefit for short term had to change. We had to somehow find a way to do that. And I'll go back to my first company. Keegan Resources went from 10 cents to $9 per share on the discovery of a gold mine in Africa. Well, I've spent the money I've made on there. So has probably every shareholder. I bought a lot of more mining stocks, and I own some that could be worth something. But for the most part, that the last time I worked there was in 2012. And then I started Caden. But the money's been spent. But today there's 8,000 people that are impacted with jobs, and the mine's producing. And there was a lot of sustainable things we have done there as well. So when you ask a mining entrepreneur like myself, what is the most gratifying part of a discovery? There's three factors. One is, you face the challenge, you get it right. Two is you make everyone a lot of money, yourself money. But three, and the thing that I'm most proud of, is I get to impact thousands of people's lives, or 1,000 people's lives, for multi-decades to come. And if you can put yourself into a small town, into the Andes, and imagine those people will have farming for decades to come because we came and explored. That's a really, really proud event for us to be part of. And the whole team's been great at integrating. We've spent more money than most would. It's cost us $40 million in 9 years to get to a drill turning. We're on hole 7 as we speak here. But every penny we spent from an exploration potential has been worth it. But the gratification came so far is how much the people will have a chance to benefit. And that's catching a little bit of a wave here across the other communities that we're going to bring stuff into. And we did this all without an ability to drill, without a social access permit. And we're doing it beyond that. So we're
Well,
hoping that we find one soon.
you set the stage there. A lot of companies talk about ESG, and sometimes I think it's more about promotion than it is about reality. But what you've done there is sort of set a foundation that if you are successful, should help you in the permitting of a mine if there's one there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one part of it, but even getting the opportunity to drill the targets, to drill the holes, I mean, we have a chance the whole time we're drilling to find one and create significant financial wealth for shareholders, but the community has to benefit as well. And I'm saying the
Absolutely.
fact that what we've done so far and it's actions before words can benefit them long beyond when we're there. And that's a reputation we're going to build on. And everywhere we go, whether it's South America or anywhere in North America, anywhere we go explore, we just want to make sure that the chance we get to win the proverbial lottery ticket is benefiting the communities as well while we take that chance. So very proud of that. And if you find a large mine and this is not done well, that mine may be worth zero, no matter what value you think is there. We've seen a mine in Peru called Minas Conga that spent $5 billion to build it. And it's still not producing today, 20 plus years later, because
Wow.
a few hundred people were missed, I guess. I don't know the true story, but there was a little bit of a gap on the social, or maybe 110 people. The power is not as much with the government in Peru, it's with the people, the local people that live there. So when people ask, there's a lot of power within the government to give you your permits to do things from an environmentally sensitive pathway, but the government cannot overrule the communities that you're going to be working in their backyard. And that's something that has to be respected by any explorers in any region.
Anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, the people have the right. And that's great that it's still like that. And I hope it stays like that. I think from our perspective, when looking at jurisdictions, I really like what's happening in Argentina. We haven't gone there yet. I believe with you, there's a lot of potential for that to improve. What's challenging in some parts of the world is if there's a checkered past, is it better now and going to stay better, or will it go back to that eventually? And I think that demand in metals is going to really solidify that good path forward that a lot of these countries, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, I think you're going to see a lot of these companies come online that have a lot of rich underexplored metal to extract. Eventually, we're going to get metal out of these tough spots. And I find the bigger challenge is who benefits from it. And what you have in some countries, second world countries, it stays in the main city. It doesn't impact the peripheral as much, and it needs to be wider distributed, or bringing in agriculture, bringing in a lot of things. If the citizens of extracting the metal can contribute in a very sustainable manner, the benefit's instantaneous, and there is carried benefit whether money filters down from the government or not. We've talked about sharing the project with the community, giving them a bit of a royalty on it or a few percent ownership. And this has been pushed back because the understanding of the commercial end of things is not high, especially when you go to some of these rural towns. And again, I stick back to what I said earlier, action before words. It's an education, it's a relationship building. It took us almost 9 years to get our project online. They got to know who we were. We lived in the communities. We did the programs. We're still doing them. And now we're providing jobs. So I think if you live near a potential major discovery, it's done more responsibly from an environmental than it was ever done before in the times where mining got criticized in the 80s. And I think from the perspective of social benefits, environmental responsibility, it's never been better. And it can still improve from where things are now going forward. But we're very pleased. I love Peru. Some of the largest mines in the world are in Peru. The geology says it could be there in our company and a few others, I'm sure, that are drilling. And that's, to me, what gives me the perseverance and the drive and the ambition to go in and explore, intently for a major discovery. And we have an analog in our first areas. We're testing the first 5% of our large land position to Las Bambas. Las Bambas is the 11th largest producing copper mine in the world. And we measure this by the style of rocks we see, the style of geology, similar geology, the time it was created. It's the same era that Las Bambas was created. That is a critical aspect when drawing analogs in different major mines in the world. There's eras that were very prolific with major mines being formed. What rocks are meeting each other
Just
and
for
creating the copper
our
to accumulate.
just
Mhm.
for our non-geologist audience, Ivan, you have obviously done age dating and
That's what I was referring to.
profiling, and so this when when Ivan's using that analogy, it's not just hopes and dreams saying, oh, yeah, look, there's a big mine over there. We're just like it. There's a lot of science that goes into being able to honestly say what Ivan has said. And Ivan has long been known for doing real serious work, age dating of rocks, and uh, doing a lot of geochemical work, geophysics. These are this isn't just, oh, there's a big mine over there and
No.
we've got one look, we got a
So,
look-alike over here.
well, a few key points there, and I'm glad you brought it up, and I'll quantify it for the generalist and the technical person. We use electrical currents and we use magnetic currents to either conduct or reflect or find magnetic rocks beneath the surface. They give us a big balloon shape that we get excited about because it could be copper and gold in those shapes, right? We dig trenches, which is like where my fingers here is, like we'll dig 100 meters across the surface if we have exposure to the bedrock. We're in an area where a volcano erupted and most of it covered by ash that turned to dirt. So there's very few windows through erosion that expose us to the bedrock. And we're seeing really good grades of copper, anywhere from 0.3 to 1% copper, over big widths of areas that we've trenched. There are 8 historic drill holes for an iron explorer, and it's right back on this ridge here. They were starting to mine some iron and they drilled some holes into it looking for how much iron they could extract. And they saw copper in those holes. We actually assayed those holes and they returned great values. 100 meters of about 0.5, 0.6% copper. Again, that world threshold right on surface. So it'd be a very favorable grade to go and extract at a very profitable kind of potential ratio in a mining scenario. So we not only have signals that show us the big potential target beneath the surface that starts at surface, we have on the surface, we have 2 feet deep trenches, or channel samples, we call them, but trenches. And then we have drill holes on the edge of the big system, the big signals. And this gives us the confidence, to your point, that this is not just, oh yeah, there's a mine there and we might have the same mine. We've compared so many different layers of scientific evidence. And the last point I'll make on it, the BHP is the largest miner in the world. They were one of the people following this project. And the gentleman, Keenan Jennings, the head of exploration for BHP, he retired last year and he joined our board in the first quarter of this year. And not only is that important from the head of exploration, one of the largest miners, or the largest miner in the world, for a validation point, but he also had mapped Las Bambas, the mine that is the 11th largest mine in the world, back in 2001. So his familiarity is most certainly there in the area. He's been to Simbera before he joined us. He was looking at us with potential intent from BHP. And then from that, a colleague of his joined as well, MJ McQuay, where she was running VP of operations for BHP. So now we have an exploration level from a major miner. We have operational thinking, so we can take long lead time mines to shorten time frame towards production and monetize what we have more intelligently. And the last part was Tech bought into our company in May of this year. We raised 19.4 million and Tech bought 9.9% of our company. That's a third party that likes the geology, the potential. They might be an end suitor, and they
And
bought
they know a
almost
little bit
10% of
about
it.
copper.
Yeah, they're one of the larger base metal companies in the world, and they've been an absolute pleasure as a shareholder. And their expertise in Peru is really, really strong. So we're really excited to have those validations. We've had a lot of other companies look at us wanting that investment. They won the bidding race to get there. And now we're actually, and this is a very important factor as well, we're financed up until through the end of next year. So till 2026 Q1, and we're funded to drill at least 30 holes. And this is important because our industry has suffered immensely from the lack of capital. Those 30 holes give us the chance to drill those big holes that could start to give that big lift potentially in the share price of a discovery being made. That was the real art behind this company. Wasn't just the time and the money spent and the uncomfortable checks. And I've written some very large ones to keep this company, to get it to the point of permitting and drilling. But it's been to have enough money to be able to drill enough holes to make the big discovery.
Right.
We're exploring what's called a skarn. And to make it real simple, underground volcano goes up, it hits rocks on the side, and where those rocks meet is where there's a chemical reaction and copper and gold can just explode and form a deposit, right? Skarns are very erratic. They're not uniform. They're tough, but they tend to be extremely rich in terms of values. They can provide a lot more profitable mining scenario. We have 9 kilometers of continuous targets to go drill and test. We're on the first few hundred meters. That's a lot of areas that we could find a substantial potential deposit. So
And
it's going
they're
to take some
also
time.
associated with other kinds of deposits too, right,
Yep.
Ivan?
Yep. They're associated with the porphyry deposits, right? There's an engine underground, the underground volcano, to be real succinct about it and generalist friendly. If it has metals in it, specifically in our case, copper and gold in it, that's the cause of all the mineralization coming to surface. If you can find the crust, which is that rocks that meet each other and there's a chemical reaction, plus the cause of what that underground volcano, if you can find both of them, that's when you start to see the really, really massive discoveries like Las Palmas. They have both. And we're exploring for both. So far, we've announced in our press release that we've seen evidence of both in our fourth hole. That's
And
where we
it's
start
not
to really
just
see them.
not even before the drill holes. It's you also have other evidence in that you can see a scarn right down the side of
Oh,
a.
you're referring to there's a cliff which is about 400 meters from top to bottom, and you see a beautiful. If you look at our deck or our presentation online, you'll see this beautiful rusty brown skarn body, and you'll see some mining at its 200 meters down the cliff. You'll see a lot of samples we took on the surface. You see a lot of samples peripheral to it, and if you compare that to where we're drilling, you will see a lot of the same evidence. And so we're visualizing that cliff exists in a lot of other places. It's about 7 kilometers away from where we're drilling right now, but it
Okay.
gives us a free 3D look of what we might be exploring for. Now, there's one caveat on skarns: they're extremely variable, and finding where that rusty brown, where that contact is, can be challenging. It might take 8 holes, 10 holes before we get that first, real big hole that the market's like, wow, they've got it. But what we've said so far publicly in our fourth hole, we don't have the results yet. We should have them by the end of this month, and we'll start putting out our news. We've said we're starting to see in our drilling, comparing it to all the science we're doing, we're starting to see that our thesis and our model is showing us the right type of rocks that should be present that could host not only the skarn, but also the porphyry mineralization. Our
And
early
sulfides,
evidence,
right? You're also
and it's a lot of sulfides, yeah,
yeah.
rock that's not oxidized. We are seeing a lot of evidence that our thesis could be correct. Now we're in the extremely early infancy of a discovery, and that's means there's going to be a bit of time before we can really expose value and before we really start to hit the sweet spots. But the flip side of that is the share price is at the infancy of something that has a big what if. Could it be the next top 10 or top 20 major copper mine in the world when copper's going into supply shortages? It's hard to find. And then the last part I'll make as a point here, and I'd love to go through every slide of my deck because it's so exciting, but I'll say that we have 4 sources of water nearby that we're pumping water to our drill so we don't have to truck it.
Roads and
We have
power.
roads, we have power, and power is a big one. You can hear the high tension power lines above your head. It's like mine power above the drill as you drill. The terrain is moderate, as you see in the background here.
Yeah.
You can drill year round. There's no issue with flooding, and usually the first quarter of each year is a rainy season in Peru. And if you have the steeper terrain way in the background back here, you'll have issues for a lot of reasons. But topography is excellent. Road accessibility right to the drill. You can drive to it. There's 2 towns nearby. They do not look at where we're drilling. They're down the hill. And so they're on the other side of the ridge. And so it's a workforce. It's not impeding anybody's backyard. So that scenario there will make the grade and what we find a lot more profitable should we get into a mining
That's
scenario.
a really great point because you look at a lot of projects out there and it's starting to get quite a bit under that 0.5%. And yes, those can be mined and they can be great, profitable mines because you're moving a lot of rock. But the cost to do that, it affects the profitability. And so when you have the infrastructure there, it has a really positive effect on what you need to find, not just the grade, but the size of what you need to find. Like you said, look at the mountains in the back there.
Yeah.
If you're trying to mine something there or on that flat ground where there's roads and there's power and everything going to it, it has a big impact on what you need to find to have an economically viable mine.
Yeah, and then the last part, which is critical, is how many mines could you find on your property? And that's where this one advertised so well 9 years ago, why we spent 9 years of our life and $40 million. So I said earlier, the odds are 1 in 1,000 you find something that makes it to production. The 8 holes drilled here previously, a lot of the surface exposure, it brings our risk down a lot and gives us a lot of room for a lot of upside. But we right now have 9 major targets to go test and drill over the next 18 months, right? And each one of those standalone could be substantial. We don't know which one will be the best one. We don't have a favorite target. We have some that are much more obvious than what we're drilling now that we'll drill in the first quarter and second quarter of next year. But we're unsure. The ones that are slightly covered by this green volcanic rock that you can see here, where rocks aren't sticking out like you see there,
Right.
you have to rely on the magnetic signals, the electrical signals, and you're guessing a little bit, they're speculating on where it could be exactly. And so there's a lot of science, there's a lot of unknown, and we don't know yet where the largest, the richest part will potentially be. And that's a very good problem to have because we have 9 different places that it can occur. And some of them already have drill holes in them, like the one I've referenced to earlier, and they're quite obvious. But I lose sleep at night over, I'm comfortable with the obvious ones, but I'm also really curious when you go underneath a little bit of a few meters of cover where you can't see the rocks, what are you going to find? And at the end of the day, it's going to take us at least 1.5 to 2 years to test most of these targets and see what we have.
Anywhere
That long,
along that, you could have some wonderful surprises.
and so we are learning a lot from every hole we drill. No one's ever targeted this before copper. It's predominantly, except for one small area where there was 8 holes, which we're not drilling yet, but everywhere else is virgin territory for exploring. Each hole we drill, each meter of rock we see, we're learning so much. And our vectoring of knowledge into confidence has been outstanding per hole. We're now on hole 8, and we're starting to learn so much about where to go next
One
and
of
where
those
this thing could be
things,
robust.
folks, that you can learn is just that is the geophysical technique that we're using, can it be confirmed with a drill hole? And if you can have a geophysical anomaly that also is backed up by a drill hole, now that has a big effect on other geophysical anomalies around throughout the property.
As well as surface results that sit on top of those geophysical signatures. Geophysical meaning electrical or magnetic reflections or currents or conductions that you see beneath the surface. So we have the surface layer, we have its subsurface, and when we drill into it, we're either getting into the system, we see that those signals work and we keep going, or we see it's not working and we have to go somewhere else. So far, as we've said publicly, it's going really well, and it's starting to reflect that those signals mean a lot. And now it's more about where's the sweet spot? How big is the sweet spot going to be? How rich is it going to be? And we have 9 different areas to ask that question. But all of those targets mean more now based on what we've learned in the first few holes that we've been drilling. So it's outstanding. We have a great team at the board level, former BHP executives. We have 3 of them that were heads of department in BHP. One was exploration, one was quality, the quality of what all of exploration at BHP, and the other one was operations, as I've mentioned. In the field, our VP of exploration is Tim Kingsley. He had worked in Peru extensively, lived there for some time, speaks fluent Spanish, but he's a base metal explorer from Trevally, which was a very famous zinc explorer. But his knowledge with base metals and his background in Peru and his comfortable of being fluent in Spanish and working in a country where he has experience, it's been outstanding. He's extremely prudent with his approach, and he's conservative in nature, which is great. Keeps us all very even keeled and an exciting adventure. And then Christian Rios, our VP of corporate development, he's Peruvian. He lives in Lima. He's unlocked the social axis, and he's been driving us through all the permits. But he worked with the late David Lowell, and David Lowell
Oh,
was the
wow.
gentleman who discovered Escondida. and he worked with him on Bear Creek. So we have one of the most impressive technical teams as a
David
junior, small
Lowell is
company. Yeah,
one of the
number one, number
most
one.
amazing exploration discovery guys in the history. Is no longer with us, but
Mhm.
he has his work will spread out for many, many years. Like you were talking earlier about farming, a lot of people admire David, and he's there's some books about him. You can
Yeah,
look him up, and you
he,
should.
he he found the largest copper mine in the world, but I think he had 40 discoveries. In the odds of one in a
Purina, look at
thousand.
what
Yeah.
that did for
Mhm.
Barrick and
Mhm.
Arequipa, and
Mhm.
oh,
So
and the
many.
list goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and I got to meet him while he was still alive, and he showed me a copper price chart with the projection of copper, and it's right on schedule to what he showed me to the
Wow.
dollar, like to the 20 cents. So he's
Wow.
a very, very smart guy. It's sad that he's gone. We're trying with some great people, but getting this kind of expertise, getting people from the majors, that caliber onto the board and people in the field and getting the endorsement from tech. Newmont owns 6.25% of the company as well. This really gives us a stage, a treasury to go and do that. And the last point I'll make here about it, Allan, is discovery is risky, extremely risky. And for me, I like risk more than the average entrepreneur in my space because the more risk, the more reward. And a major project makes you serious money if you get it right. They do take a bit of time, so it requires a bit of patience. You're in the case of Sombrero and Coppernico metals, right now, in my personal view, the biggest downside would be if we didn't drill something good enough and we ran out of money, but we have enough money to drill 30 plus holes, money to the end of next year. And that brought that whole risk down considerably. And we're really encouraged by our first few holes that we're drilling. And we think that the system's has a really good chance to deliver potential multiple major discoveries. And again, we're just getting started. This is very early. This is just the start. I can't wait for first results, and I can't wait for all the results that are going to come continuously as we go into a rising copper market.
Well, and I think, Ivan, it's a little difficult for you to probably talk about yourself in this way, but I will. You have a very good reputation in the industry, represented by what you've been able to raise just prior to get going on this drilling. But I've even noticed in your valuation that as you're starting to show some smoke and maybe a bit of fire, that the trend is starting to improve. And if you can keep on going in that direction, you should get the backing, the financial backing, because of your reputation in the industry and the quality of work that you do.
No, thank you. It's the trick is my team. Surround myself with great people, then I can perform well for shareholders. This company was spun out of a company called Orin 3 years ago. I've invested over 6 million of my own dollars into Orin and this company combined. So I'm a shareholder first, and I'm a CEO second. For those of you who don't know me, I'm extremely transparent where I can be as on any topic of consequence, and I like to bring people along the adventure that we're on. There's going to be volatility. There's going to be
That's why
swings
I
up,
do these
swings down,
shows,
and yeah,
Ivan. I like to, I think our industry could do a lot better at, we're in the treasure hunting business. We poke holes in the ground looking for buried treasures. This is exciting stuff. But
yes.
sometimes I find that the industry doesn't really bring their shareholders and their audience into the process. Nobody can guarantee that you're going to poke a hole and find a mine, but it's a very exciting process, and I think more companies should do a better job of bringing the audience into this treasure hunting business.
Well, I think the bigger you swing for something, the more audience you're going to have, and that's certainly what we're doing here. Las Bambas is about $100 billion ore body, and that's what we're swinging for. And it won't happen overnight. There's too much to drill. We are adding more permits to add more rigs or more drill rigs right now. And we are looking to expand our ability to drill. We can drill 49 holes off 38 pads. We're expanding that to 200 pads. These are some initiatives we're taking based on the early smoke that we've referenced, that we're starting to see. And that's a massive, massive statement because that's a commitment that is made when you like what you're seeing generally versus you don't, because you're speculating that if not now, but soon, you might get into a situation with a lot more capital, and then you would want to add more drills because we're trying to shorten the time frame of learning, not just for the sake of we would all like everyone to benefit sooner, but also for the sake of if we start finding something and the model starts working substantially, we want to be able to get as much information as we can before another bigger company potentially buys us, one of the suitors that are looking at the asset right now. So there's a two-part approach. We see enough without getting our first results out. We see enough from a geological perspective, from the model responding well. We see enough there, and looking at the rest of our targets that, the demand is we need to add more drills is what I'm getting from the field. So that time is money. And if we can shorten that and monetize, at a better pace and be defensive by learning more and getting more value, we will certainly take that approach. Again, shareholder first, CEO second. How can I make the share price perform exceedingly well for shareholders and hold on to this long enough to drill at least 2 or 3 of those 9 big targets that we, that could start really revealing the potential discovery. So it's an exciting stage from now and to the end of next year. We're going to hear so much from the drill bit. We're going to test so many different targets. We're going to be vectoring each hole that we drill is going to teach us more about where to go next. And once it starts, once we hit those first holes that really tell us we're into it, then it becomes that roller coaster of excitement and things go. And hopefully that's here in the near term, but I don't think it'll be too long based on how the targeting is going. There's a lot of really good targets to go after, and we're going for it.
Well, as you were talking about that, it reminded me of something that my mentor in geology told me a long time ago that I've never forgotten because I've seen it play out so many times, Ivan. He said that every project in exploration starts out really, really big. And then when you drill it, most of them get really, really small. And he said that mines are different. He said that mines, you put more science into them and they get better and better and better. And along that way, a lot of times there are some very pleasant surprises.
Mhm.
That's what mines tend to give you, is that it gets better and better and you get these pleasant surprises. But another thing that is really important is that when you have a great project, it also attracts great people.
Mhm.
And the fact that you've attracted, BHP people, and it says a lot about the quality of the work you've done, the kind of project it is, and the size you're looking for.
Yeah, 100%. So every hallmark of what could lead to discovery is happening. Great people, the investment audience, major mining companies investing for validation that it's a great shot to find something here. It's all happening. It's exciting. It's hard to sleep at night because you're wondering what each hole looks like and what the next hole might look like. But it's good, and it's got a lot of time left to get the first early answers out. And the copper market that we've dreamed about, as I said earlier before the interview, it's the perfect timing that we've timed accidentally on purpose, right? It's nothing that we planned, but it planned us, and it planned us perfectly. So really excited and can't wait to get to results. And if you haven't heard it, and if you want to know more, CoppernicoMetals.com, please visit us. I'm
That's
reachable.
copper, NICO.
That's named after Copernicus, just for the root of the name. So I'm a big fan of Robert Friedland and a lot of success he's had. And I followed Ivanhoe. I was a shareholder of African Minerals in 1995. 17 years later, Ivanhoe Mines went public, the current one today, and it's been one of the best performers, or it is one of the best performers on the board. And I like the name Ivanhoe. My name is Ivan. I'm not a narcissist or want to name one after myself, but I liked it. A great discoverer. And so we looked up who is another amazing discoverer. And Copernicus realized that the planets went around the sun, not the sun going around the planet. So I figured that'd be one of the greatest discoverers of all time. And that's how we came up with Copernico. So that's the
Okay.
root behind the name. So thinking big and thinking as others have and trying to make a major discovery. And that's what we're all about.
Well, you've got good. You're shooting at some good people there, and so I'm going to close it off. Ivan, did you have a closing comment? I think you pretty much told a great story of what you're doing here.
No, just thank you very much. And thank you to all our shareholders who helped get us here and to the communities allowing us to drill. We appreciate you all very much. And thank you, Allan, for taking this interview the time. It's an exciting adventure and we can't wait to learn more about it. Thank you.
Well, I enjoyed it myself. As you can see, I've had a smile on my face because when I see an excited fellow treasure hunter, it's always great to chat. So thanks a lot. We have to do it again, Ivan.
Absolutely. It was my absolute pleasure. Thank
I'm
you.
going to close it off and we can talk at the other end.
Perfect.
So there you go, folks. As I started out, I'm very bullish on copper. I think that it could go up multiples of where it is right now. The industry needs a lot more projects in the development stage just to meet the demand. Actually, just to be able to replace the old mines that Ivan was talking about with new mines. There's not enough in the development stage. And then there's really tight on the exploration stage to put the next wave of development projects up. And so I'm although I'm very bullish on copper, I have a hard time finding a lot of really great copper exploration stories. And that's why I've been following Copernico and Ivan, because is a very talented guy. He's done this before, and he has a very great reputation in the business, does great work. And this is the kind of situation that, if they're successful, could be a wonderful opportunity for investors. And so that's why I wanted to have Ivan on and tell the Copernico story. Do your homework, speak with your financial advisors, check out their website. Even just looking at their website and you look at their corporate presentation, it gives you an idea of the thinking behind the team. It's a 40-page long document, lots of great details in there. And as you can tell, Ivan's very enthusiastic about the treasure hunting business. And I think they've got something really special here in a situation where copper is going to go up, but there's not a lot of opportunities for investors to find really great copper exploration stories. I've been in this business since Ivan said about 60 cents a pound copper. So I've gone through a lot of cycles, and I'm a very bullish on copper. You just can't find a lot of great copper exploration stories. Copernico has one. Do your homework on it. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.